I nearly can't recognize all of you. So we begin now? Okay. Where am I? Where am I? Yes, I would like to talk about, yes, of course, Xi Jinping, but I don't think you're very interested in his personal life, isn't it? Right? It's not about his personal life at all, and not to mention that anyone who talks about Xi Jinping's personal life is dangerous. I'm not joking because back in 2015, 5 Hong Kong bookshop owners and staff were secretly arrested in China, and the crime is what? Is the publications of Xi Jinping's personal life. So we better not to talk about Xi Jinping's personal life, whether he has a mistress or not. So, but I first begin the talk with a reviews on this white paper revolution. I'm so happy about this, and why? Because the last 30 years was the most depressing periods in China history, because we never, for the past more than 150 years, we never experienced such a political atmosphere in China. Never. From the late Qing dynasty, especially the young people, they are always very politicized. And it is what makes Chinese Revolution, successful in the first place. The 1911 revolution, the great Chinese proletarian revolutions in the 1920s, and so on and so forth. But in the past 30 years, what's that? Okay, hopefully there will be another fire alarm. But I believe it's 100% coincidence. Well, I'll go to that later. Okay, have some patience, please. So it's the last 30 years is the most political eras in China contemporary history, because China's rise, China's emerging with global capitalism has attracted the whole population to try to, for the lower class, to work hard to earn money, from rural moving to the cities. For the middle class, they are engaged in personal enrichment, career building, and so on. No one gives a shit to politics. Everyone for himself and God for us all. This is the most depressive period, actually. It looks like it will go on and on and on. After the Tiananmen massacre, even those overseas Chinese students, they, after active for a few years, most of them actually, yes, the same kind of story. And that is why the situation is so depressive. But with this white paper revolution, for the moment, we should not have too high expectation that this will immediately ignite a great revolution right now. I hope so. It's not easy. But I think, and I suspect, it is better that way, because we are no match to the Communist Party right now. So first, we have a reawakening of political interest, reawakening of the people, and then slowly to connect ourselves, to rethink everything before we push for a great change. I think this will be better, actually. So, so this great white paper revolution is a great thing, and this and I need to clarify one thing, which is very important to understand, because there have been other left-wing people likely to be Beijing apologists. They come forward with the argument that the Chinese protests against the lockdown are comparable to those right-wing people in America, in Europe, and other parts of the world to campaign for to campaign against vaccination in principle, to campaign against every kind of lockdown in principle, in the name of so-called personal freedom. Well, this is as I understand it, this is not our argument here, but there are people who believe this kind of crap. But this thing needs to be clarified first. In China, in just less than a week, there were at least in 20 cities, there were protests, not just students. Among the university, more than 120 universities have witnessed the protest as well, not to mention those overseas. So it's huge, comparatively, for the first time since 1989. So, but this big protest is not protesting against lockdown in principle as a tactic to deal with a spreading pandemic. It is a lie to compare that with those right-wing people in in other parts of the world. They are against lock up, because the lockdown version promoted by Xi Jinping is the most crazy, inhumane lockdown you ever have, because they lock up people at their homes. I can show you pictures. I just came back from the Netherlands. I delivered a 1.5 hour talk over the China situation. Yeah, but I can't now. I can show you pictures about all this. They lock up people at their home. They lock up people at the entrance of the building, and they lock up all their neighborhoods or the communities there. And to the extent that if there are people who are sick, people who are dying, pregnant women who are giving birth to baby, people who do not have food supply, they don't give a shit to you. Anyone who try to break out of this lockdown, they will get into prison. And also, many people were being sent to the Fangchang, those quarantine places. But actually, the quarantine places are so packed with people that if you don't have COVID, you can easily get COVID. And that's people are protesting against this madness. So it is against lock up, not lockdown. in general, if you want, we would like to say. So, but what is it to do with Xi Jinping? Well, a lot to do with him. But we must first give credit to one person. That it is he who has started this everything. Now, because before the fire in Urumqi, where it triggered off this great wave of protest, when during the 20th Party Congress, there is one person, you have probably heard of it already, the Pang Zhaizhou. His single person protest at the Seaton Bridge is monumental, because it is he, for the first time, really, in 30 years, that he broke the silence of the people. He voiced out one thing, that we must remove Xi Jinping. Of course, he has a whole lot of program and so on, which is largely as the fight for political freedom, against those mad, crazy, those COVID tests. Yeah? It's so crazy that the local government will force people to have COVID tests day in and day out, sometimes 3 times a day. So it is all madness. And this guy, this Pang Zhaizhou, came out in a single person to protest against all this. And he summarized with one word, that we must remove Xi Jinping. Well, in China, okay, if you demand for freedom of the press, you go to jail. If you condemn one party dictatorship, you go to jail. But if you target the top leaders to demand for remove him, you may not just go to jail. Much worse than that could happen to you. But this guy knew this very well, and he took all the risk on himself and do this. And this, I think, and there is one, and actually he's not just hanging the banners, huh? It's very well planned. Before he hang out the banner, he already released the news in the social media. Some friends did it for him. Absolutely, obviously, it is a whole kind of program, an action program. And what distinguished him from his kind of liberal is in matters of political orientation. But he was, I don't know, because someone said that he was already killed. I don't know. But anyway, the most important, one of the most important messages is what? He was comparing Xi Jinping with Yuan Shikai. Yuan Shikai, who is that? He was the first president of the Republic of China after the 1911 revolution. So, and then, well, he's a very conservative, and then in just a few years, I think it's 1916, he wanted to become emperor. And then by that time, actually, many Chinese are very conservative still, they do not have much experience in democratic revolution at all. So this president was very dictatorial. But if he did not attempt to become emperor, people may tolerate him. He may be still in power. I mean, in a few years' time. But he made a mistake. He underestimated the Chinese people. Albeit Chinese people by that time are still, quite conservative in the political perspective, which means they thought we always need an emperor. Huh? This kind of thinking. And then it's progressively, after the 1911 revolution, At least there's one good thing that, okay, we don't need an emperor. That is a progress in political thinking among among common people. And that is why Yuan Shikai's attempt failed miserably. He was just in power for 183 days as emperor. And then he was toppled. But, this is a very important message to the Chinese. It's very important because people immediately make the links between the historical lesson and Xi Jinping. And people now believe one thing. Before that, before the 20th Party Congress, some people may still have some illusion that, well, maybe Xi Jinping would not claim for the third term, or maybe Xi Jinping is not that bad. With the 20th Party Congress, it's very clear. There's no doubt that China is moving to become another North Korea in terms of political institution, and that is frightening for Chinese. Okay, we can somehow tolerate Jiang Zemin or Hu Jintao, but what about someone who has the ambition to become emperor? That is, many Chinese people would never forgive him, especially with when one links with the historical lessons of Yuan Shikai. So what is more important actually is, I have been arguing for years that Xi Jinping is a very, very dangerous person, not because he is particularly smart. I don't think so, really. His article is so boring. Absolutely just crappy things written by his secretaries. So but the problem is, he repeatedly said one word in his speeches and everything, that we are the second red generation. We have a 红色基因. To put it in the English terms, we are of the blue blood. So we are the bearer of revolution. So, and that is very dangerous because it is hereditary. It's meant a hereditary regime, yeah, based on blue blood. And actually, this is also, very, very divisive, even among the bureaucracy, because for 2,000 years of ancient China, there's always some kind of tension between two reactionary clique in the bureaucracy. Those who were blue blood, close to the royal family, and also but those who have who passed through successfully all the examination barrier and became top bureaucrats. They always have kind of tension, because those who get those lower classes people, but they were able to climb to the top because of their working hard through the examination. They always have tension with the blue blood, of course, yes, the royal families, cronies. So this and actually the emperor always has to balance himself between these two factions, but China actually, I think Deng Xiaoping of course knows this very well, and that was why after he came to power, he began to lay down a more so-called an arrangement to have more collective responsibility, to have some restrictions on this reactionary blue-blooded clique. But with Xi Jinping overthrowing all this, it also alienated a large part in the party bureaucracy. So I have to cut short now, but you will know, then you understand why he's trying to making some partial concession trying to tone down his once very rigid ideas of so-called zero COVID policy and so on. So and it is the first time we ever have seen someone who protests against a new top leader in so short period of time. It's the first time we ever saw this. So there will be, Xi Jinping will find himself in a more difficult situation, actually. But we have also to thank Pang Zhaizhou. Of course, when you read the Pang Zhaizhou's program, you say, no. He talks about color revolution. But I would like to remind the comrades here, whatever they wrote, you must understand one thing, that you must ask yourself one thing: are they talking the same thing as you? Not necessarily. Who knows? I don't know, because he thought that, according to what he wrote, it seems that he thought that color revolution means non-violent revolution, not the color revolution we understand in other parts of the world. Of course, it is my interpretation. I may be wrong, or it is his interpretation. He may be wrong, but the point is not technically wrong or right here. The point is, we must not forget one thing: that China's we have a very strict censorship in China, uninterrupted for 70 years. Imagine that. Generations after generations of students are trained in this Orwellian state and its education, and they only have a glimpse of what is beyond that, what is beyond the Great Wall. So they use terms sometimes, unthinkingly, or just according to their own understanding and so on. And of course, but that's one thing is clear, though. Yeah, his program is liberal, because he not only he doesn't mention any labor rights at all. He even mentions about the government needs to protect the private bourgeoisie, something like that. Well, but again here, I think you have to be very careful. But anyway, I will agree. Yes, this is a liberal program. But there is one thing which departs from the other liberals. Say, for instance, Liu Xiaobo or others. They are one of the particularities of these liberals. They are very timid. They are very coward. They never dare to call for mobilizing the people. But this Pang Zhaizhou, the first, is very daring. He's a daredevil, absolutely. He called for the mobilization, for strike, for school boycott, to remove Xi Jinping. Yes. Okay. I will be finishing the several sentences there. So this is his, and by that time I wrote about this, that despite this limitation of his program, his call for strike is very, very important. In the course of the matters, it may when the past mobilizations began, the real struggle will go beyond what he originally think. And that is why I think by that time it's very important for us to give critical support to his call. And I'm happy, yes, because we are already witnessing there the peoples are actually going beyond what he's calling for. The most obvious is what is the Zhangzhou Foxconn workers. They actually fight with the security guys, with the police to get free of themselves. And in the course of it, there's suddenly in the social media so many posts they're being posted out, and there's so many discussions. I never saw that for 30 years. The last time it was in 1989, and in the course of this debate, people are beginning to argue. Look, come on, we cannot limit ourselves to just political freedom. We must demand for labor rights as well if we want to mobilize the workers. So this is the chance of the left wing, and well, the futures partly also depends on how we react. If we stick in our past, stick in our own small world without grasping the multi-level, complicated, multi-dimensions of Chinese struggle, we will miss the chance. But hopefully not. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alan. I'm sorry that we've lost time in this discussion, but we have still got just under 40 minutes for contributions and responses. I suggest probably I'll take it in 2 rounds and get out to come back in the middle, so it's easier to remember what people said. So can I see people who want to speak? I'm not seeing anybody online yet. Okay, so I'm going to take Steve and then Sora. Ron, can you? And then I'll see if anybody comes online. Sorry, yes. Steve at the end, Sora at the other end.
Thanks very much.
Oh, don't do that. Yes.
Let you behave yourself. I think all of us here would agree with Al that this constitutes, one of the most dramatic developments in Chinese history, probably since Tiananmen, and it certainly demands our attention and understanding of the significance of it and what its potential is. And in the situation, it's not surprising that people focus on the personality of Xi Jinping, because obviously he is at the center of affairs. However, as Marxists, as Trotskyists, we clearly look beneath the surface of particular personalities to see what is it in the economic and political conjuncture which brings such a person to the leadership. That doesn't happen by accident. It's the result of forces within the regime. And I think what's clear with Xi Jinping is that although in his first term, he quite clearly favored further concessions to the free market and to the growing Chinese bourgeoisie, after 2015, 2016, and then the stock exchange crisis, he quite clearly turned against it. And it seems to me that indicates, that highlights a feature of modern capitalist China, that the regime is increasingly at odds with a growing and increasingly confident bourgeois class, whose interests don't coincide with those of the bureaucracy that still controls the dictatorship of the one-party state. And I think in that situation, it's hardly surprising that the focus of political opposition should be around democratic demands. And I think we have to understand that the content of all the protests at the moment, whatever the specific situation in any particular town might be, at the heart, they are demands for a removal of the one-party dictatorship and democratic demands. And I think what revolutionaries have to concern themselves with is that, of course, the bourgeoisie will also try to use democratic demands to further their interests. And therefore, the importance of the point that Al made right towards the end, that the workers have to come to the fore of the democratic movement with their own demands, their own organizations, and indeed, ultimately, their own party. And I think what the contribution that internationalists can make is to popularize that idea, to do what is possible to get those ideas inside China, perhaps via Hong Kong, although that's not as easy as it used to be. But that is our duty here and now, is to support the movement and at the same time to warn it against the dangers of being taken in tow by the bourgeoisie, both in China and internationally, because that is the great threat. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Saurabh, can you take your mask off so people who...
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. It's very interesting to see that people in China don't want any emperor anymore. And I mean, when you look at the current situation in Iran, also people in Iran don't want any more king or any laws anymore. I mean, comparing to the recent developments in Britain and Labour Party singing "God Save the Kings" in the conference, it's a good progress in the East, let's say. But anyway, my question is, I want to understand what will be the effects of the current uprising in China on the foreign relation with Taiwan. Would it be that Xi Jinping would be more focused on internal relations and be less motivated to do some more military maneuvers around Taiwan, or would it be the other way around and making more aggressive behaviors around Taiwan? Thank you very much.
Thanks. I've got Dave who wants to speak online. I'm going to take him, and then I've got Simon. And then maybe I take Anne to come back and then take another round. Dave?
Hi, thank you. Really got a question about the relations between Cuba and China, how much you could help me on this, because I don't know how much people realize in here that there are quite good relations between the Chinese leadership and the Cuban leadership. And if you read Grama, for example, they never have anything about any of the troubles in China at all. There's never any, it's just like Ukraine. They don't really deal with it very much, except to sort of summarily put over Putin's line. I'm sure it's the same on the question of China. And I don't know how far people realize that the Cuban leadership, the political bureau, key members of the political bureau have visited China in recent times. And there is much discussion, if you like, about the way in which a majority, I don't know if a majority, but a significant part of the Cuban leadership is keen on adopting the Chinese road, because of course they're involved in a transition to removing quite a lot of the sort of old nationalized industries in Cuba, and there's a whole sector of the military who are basically transforming themselves into some sort of capitalists in Cuba. So I just was interested in how much you could help us in understand that relationship, because a lot of people here still see Cuba as somehow inherently different to, and I think it still is different in some respects, to China. But they sort of leave on one side all these uncomfortable relations with China or even Putin. So if you'd like to say something on that, I'd be interested.
Thanks, Dave. I've got Simon, and then I'll take Anne to come back. And after that, I've got Imber, Mark, and Pete. I might have to start rushing people. Simon.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I want to start really from the point of what I think China is, because this is a huge debate that's happening. Mainly debate on the left, because there's some people on the left who deny reality, and they make a profession to deny reality, which is I think from my perspective, China is clearly a major capitalist power now, and is becoming an imperialist power. And I don't think we need to get into a sort of, checklist of what makes an imperialist power or not. China is clearly emerging as a global power. Doesn't mean that it's militarily competing with the US or other countries yet, but it is not possible to have a country which is the world's workshop, which is what they call China, the world's biggest working class, the most productive working class in the world, and that not to be beginning to become a rival major world power. And I think the emergence then of Xi Jinping within that context is very important, because I think it's about looking at the contradictions opening up within China. One of the contradictions is, as I said, it's got the world's biggest, most productive working class now. I think the Chinese working class is as important as Trotsky said the German working class was in the 1920s and 30s. Obviously, at the moment, unfortunately, because they live under this cruel dictatorship that calls itself communism, there is an ideological contradiction, because there will be battles for democratic rights. They're already being fought now. And those will grow, and some of them will be smashed and leaders will be arrested and killed, but then new movements will emerge. But within that, obviously, we want the working class to put forward its own socialistic demands as well. And there's a danger now, of course, because a lot of the working class will be listening to what the bourgeoisie or the kind of emerging Chinese bourgeoisie is saying, which is like, let's just fight for liberal democracy. Let's be like the West. Communism is what we used to have. We want to escape that. We want to leave that. And so for socialists to be able to articulate a vision of socialism, which is based on real workers' democracy, which is based on a real democratic plan of the economy, that's going to be crucial, because otherwise I think the working class in China, as powerful and as potentially well organized as it can be at some point in the near future, they will have that political contradiction, I think. And just the final thing, just to wrap up on very quickly, I agree very much with the points that have been made. At some point, a wing of the Chinese bourgeoisie will emerge who will compete for power with the old political elites. They're obviously quite weak at the moment, and as we keep on seeing reports of, Chinese bourgeoisie are constantly arrested. They disappeared for 6 months. They're obviously tortured, and then when they come out of prison, they're sort of broken people who don't want to stand up to the regime anymore. But eventually, some of these people will organise and they will form a political party, an illegal one at first, that will fight for power. So I think that's another contradiction within China.
Thanks, Simon. I'm going to take out, and then I'll take another list of speakers. So you should respond to those points.
About the Chinese working class, although yes, broadly speaking, yes, it is very powerful. Imagine, just remember this, that in terms of industrial working class, the Chinese account for about 1/4. If we are talking about 10 years ago, it accounts for 1/4 of the world total. In terms of service, we account for 1/5 of the total. And since then, any changes? Yes, there is. Numbers even grow bigger, but the proportion is reversed. Probably nowadays is because of the huge rise in service workers. Therefore, probably today the proportion is reversed. That is, the industrial workers accounts for 1/5 of the world. Service worker, 1/4 of the world. And I don't think you can have a world revolution without involving the Chinese working class, isn't it? It's so obvious. Yeah. So the Chinese working class, of course, is very potentially powerful. And thanks for this mad industrialization, we completed industrialization and arriving as a middle-income country in just 40 years. Whereas many countries in the world spent 100 years, 150 or even 200 years to arrive there. So yeah, in some sense, yes, Marx words still, I think, valid. That yes, the bourgeoisie is in the course of its industrialization also are helping the growth of this great figure. But the problem is, the Communist Party know this very well. They are Communist Party. Of course they know. And that is why it's not going to be easy. And that is why Chinese Communist parties have always been in a what I call a preemptive strike mode against its people. So they planned everything from kindergarten onwards. That's why when you heard the words counselors in the Chinese education, is it the same thing that you have in the other parts of the world? That I am a student and I have some kinds of personal problems, and I go to the counselors for help? No, the party don't give a shit to your mental health or your personal problems. Counselors in China education means someone who was spied on you publicly, openly, and to have thought control over you. This is always the case since 1949. And it is now digitalized. So the hard thing here is it's really hard is that precisely because it is a Communist Party. At least the name is still there. And its fear has always been very real for them. That they have to have they need the working class, but they have to decapitulate, to disable it from the very beginning, from the childhood. And that's why we have a situation where only in China, I think, in the capitalist world, that you have a party bureaucracy which is so powerful that all classes have to submit to its rule, submit to its will, and even to this and to its Orwellian rule. So it is not easy, and that is also why that this white paper revolutions announced, you may say, in terms of public protest, it dies down. The good thing is, though, the discussions among young people are still carry on. For instance, they are still, and those overseas will be still very active. And on the 10th of December, which is the Human Rights Day, there's going to have demonstrations in many parts of the world: New York, London, Paris, and so on. So I appeal to comrades that to take to the street to express solidarity with the work, with the protest with China on that day. So there's lots of other speakers, but I have no time now.
Okay, we'll take another round and then you will come back for the end. So first of all, I have Embark, and then I'll take Charlie online and then Mark.
Yeah, I would like to ask about the Chinese government and ecology. There are two things connected to the question. First of all, I understand that from what the little reading I've done, that China has invested a lot of ecology development, especially in Africa, and this kind of planting trees initiatives and solar panels initiatives and things like that. I mean, I only read very limited amount. And the other thing, on the other, how kind of, it's kind of the thing that I'm aware of is I can't remember who it was referring to the China as the factory of the world, and the fact that so many things are made in China. A lot of those things are actually not necessary for people to have, and it's a kind of part of the way that kind of I don't know if any of the workers that kind of in China kind of discussed it and kind of thought about its purpose of what they're doing, and kind of is it something that we would like need to be changed, and what will be the effect of stopping those production be on those workers?
Thanks, Imbar. Okay, let me find Charlie and get him to on. Oh no, he is unmuted. Over to you, Charlie.
Okay, thanks, Terry, and thanks very much, Al, for that very useful talk.
Charlie,
Can people? Yeah.
Can you put the camera on? Just makes it easier to hear you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Can people hear me? Can people hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool. So I had the camera off because I've got sort of slightly wonky broadband, so hopefully it won't go down during this. I wanted to come back to the comparison with 1989 and why that is so important. It's not because these are the biggest protests since 1989. There have been much bigger protest movements since 1989 at various points among peasants in central China in the late 1990s, among laid-off workers from closed down state-owned enterprises. But those were disparate and primarily aimed at either individual workplace managements or at local officials. The CCP has become very adept over the past 20-30 years at channeling anger and opposition at management, at local officials, rather than at the central government. And this is the first time since 1989 that we've seen very disparate groups of people coming together around the same issue, the anti-democratic and coercive COVID restrictions. And Al went through very clearly how these are fundamentally different to the lockdowns that we've lived through in Britain and in other Western countries. So it's a unifying issue that groups together hugely different groups of people, and it's an issue that directly stems from the central government rather than from local officials. It makes sense to petition local officials about local issues because they will get overturned by higher up. This comes the lockdowns come from the top, and if you want to fundamentally challenge those, you have to challenge the top, and that's the importance of the importance of these events. It's not simply about the Xinjiang fire. The Xinjiang fire was, if you like, the trigger for immediate events, but we have seen in the last month the very important events at the Foxconn plant in Zhengzhou. Firstly, tens of thousands of people organizing to leave before they were locked down inside the factory, and then tens of thousands of people who'd been recruited to replace those revolting in the streets because they hadn't been paid. And this shows the importance of the importance of the involvement of migrant workers. But it's important to not just see migrant workers as a separate group outside the big cities. There are also huge numbers of migrant workers in the big cities, often working in delivery industries, as domestic workers, and so on and so forth, and they will have been to the forward movement. The other thing I want to highlight is what has happened on student campuses. So, say again, Terry?
Quickly.
The other thing quickly, okay, very quickly, that there have been reports of between 50 and 70 oppositional demos on student campuses. This is the first time since 1989 that there has been this level of organisation on campuses. Now, the protests went up, went down again, but the underlying causes of those protests remain, and actually the campuses are going to be one of the most important places where people can come together and link and strategize and link up for the next round of explosions.
Thanks, Charlie. Okay, I've got 4 more speakers. I've got Mark, Pete, Dan, and Rowan.
Yeah, thank you. There were a couple of things that Pete commented back I heard early on. I think the comrade who spoke immediately after Al, and also Simon, that I'll take about, they talked about the Chinese bourgeoisie, and I want to take a bit of issue on this, whether you can separate the Chinese bourgeoisie back clearly from the state and from the Communist Party. I think that they are, there clearly are some sections which are separate, but I mean, who owns Foxconn? I mean, just to give you an idea of it, I live in a city of 250,000 people. Foxconn employs apparently 250,000 people. It's an enormous plant, but who owns it? I mean, I'm under the impression that the large parts of the ownership of Chinese industry, of capitalist possession and property and things is basically, it's a Chinese Communist Party. Extensions of it, like the military, which apparently, I mean, one thing that the US complained about the computer and phone manufacturer Huawei. And they're probably right about some of it because apparently it's owned by the Chinese military. You can't differentiate that. So I think it's a dangerous illusion to imagine you can struggle against the bourgeoisie separately from struggling against the Chinese state. The Chinese state backs up the bourgeoisie, even if they are separate, every time, as far as I can see, when it comes to worker struggle. The police, which after all, their arms of those, are totally there to smash up those workers' disputes. I don't think you can fight the two separately, and I don't think it's a realistic differentiation.
Thanks, Mark. Pete.
Thanks. I mean, I would agree with that general point, except that I read that Foxconn is Taiwanese owned, which Al will correct if I'm wrong, which is an interesting point. But I really want to come in similar lines to what Charlie said about how much this intersects with workers' revolts as workers' revolts, if you like. And I think in advance of the Foxconn workers sort of leaving the factory en masse, there was a protest at Foxconn about lack of payment of wages or late payment of wages. I'm not exactly sure, and I wondered sort of to what. And there've been protests in other factories before, and I wonder to what extent there's an overlap between people protesting against lockup and people protesting against their treatment in the factories, which would be a significant factor in terms of what various comrades have said about raising workers' rights.
Thanks, Dan, and then Ron. Most of the time.
Hi. First of all, thanks so much for your talk. It's very interesting. One of the things that I took from it is that obviously as socialists, we know that the collective force of the working class is what will change society. But it is amazing how sometimes brave individual acts, can be a spark to change. Like, who would have dreamed that someone putting some slogans on banners over a bridge, which could have just gone into the void, it might have not gone out there, might have not got anywhere. And instead, it sparked something which might end up being historical proportions. But in in terms of what's going on, I agree that we have to be quite nuanced and have to have some sympathies in terms of slogans and ideas that people have when they're fighting back against the regime. It's such an authoritarian society that I think we shouldn't approach like wrong liberal ideas in being overly dismissive or overly critical of people who are coming out of those ideas. Instead, we should, say we've got, alternative ideas, socialist ideas, and try and bring those to the fore. And one of the reasons I say that is because I've seen it again and again in terms of like it's just in terms of the kind of colour revolutions where there's a kind of crude anti-imperialism which infects large parts of the left, and people are just totally dismissive of movements, whether Kazakhstan, Syria, Iran, Hong Kong, from ridiculous ideas of saying like, oh, this is just the CIA, to kind of softer ideas of, oh, it's all good and well, people fighting for democracy and social rights, but these are just liberals. And you just think, well, wait a minute, one thing can move into another. The socialists surely are about a fight for freedom, and a fight for democracy is huge, in an authoritarian regime like China. And those ideas of fighting for freedom obviously can lead to ideas about them fighting for economic freedom as well as democratic freedom. So yeah, it's just a general point, because it does anger me a lot in terms of how a lot of the left is in terms of a lot of the movements over the last decade. But I just wondered, in terms of a question, obviously the trade unions in China are controlled by the state, but is there any, in terms of their structures of the trade unions there, is there anything there that could be potentially positively used by workers by taking over the structures of those organisations, or are they so hollow and locked down that there's, there are no benefit to a movement which could come about now?
Thanks, Dan. Rowan, it's you.
In the quantum mask. Thank you for the wonderful speech. I was interested in Xi Jinping's use of, I'll move to the French, it's very easy, his use of social reactionary currents to gain legitimacy for his regime. A long time ago, I can't remember who, I read an article sort of comparing his regime to sort of Trumpianism and, to a lesser extent, sort of what we had with Boris Johnson, this sort of kind of social reactionary currents that tried to give legitimacy, obviously in totally different political and geopolitical contexts. So is there something to that? Is there something to his wielding sort of reaction currents within China to lend the Communist Party a veneer of legitimacy?
Thanks. I'm going to take out a sum up now, and just to underline what Al said about the protests next weekend. There are certainly protests in London. We'll make sure that any information we have about protests anywhere in Britain.
One tomorrow as well.
Hang on, let me finish. Yes, there is one tomorrow. It's the CWI split. The big ones are on the 10th. And we will make sure that people are everybody who's registered are emailed the information about that. The other thing I would suggest is that if people are interested in following the politics of China, there's a very good email information list called China Concern. If you're interested in signing up to it, come and talk to me or somebody else who might tell you how to do that. Over to you, Al.
I have 7 minutes, and hopefully the bell will ring again. Okay. about how far we can expect the bourgeoisie. I mean, here is the private bourgeoisie. The private bourgeoisie will begin to have opposition against the party. I don't know. But even if it started, it won't go very far. Because Chinese, the private bourgeoisie, fundamentally has to depend on this Orwellian state to continuously repress the workers so that they won't be able to organize. But why? It is the position of China's capitalism which will determine this. Of course, this could have certain kinds of flexibility. How far it go, we don't know. But there is a limit to the private bourgeoisie's opposition, if there is going to have one, because it is the global capitalism has set a limit on the private bourgeoisie. If Chinese sweatshop has to get a profit, it has to treat workers like half forced labor. We already have forced labor in Zhengzhou Foxconn during the pandemic, right? Everyone knows this. So-called closed loop production. The workers have to not only work there, they have to sleep there, they have to eat there, they have to poo there. We already have forced labor. And do not forget one thing, that Chinese factory regimes has always been a kind of what I call it, barrack capitalism. We already have the term barrack socialism. Kautsky wrote about this. Kautsky wrote about that in the poor countries, but if you want to practice socialism, in the end you will have a barrack socialism. Everything is under ration. And surely, as Trotsky said, if everything has to be rationed, who is the most powerful people? Of course, the bureaucracy. So in the end, you will have the opposite of socialism. This was what similar situations in the Mao's China. But the unfortunate thing about Mao's China is that from a barrack so-called socialism, it is very easily to evolve into a barrack capitalism. All you have to do is to just change the name, right? So easy. From a Chinese socialist planned economy, it becomes Chinese socialist market economy. So simple. So, and that's leads us to the question about the trade unions. No, the official trade unions is maybe in Russia that some lower levels trade unions could be reformed a bit or less repressive, more a bit pro workers maybe, but not I know of China. And I do not content in theorizing, in readings. We actually did a lot of solidarity work with Chinese labor for the past 20 years. I personally involved in the workers' dispute and workers' organizing in Danish investment in Northeast China. And we had, and the workers want a workplace union. What did they get from the upper level union? The upper level unions, cadres, talk to the boss, teach them how to do, to repress workers. That is the ACFTU. So for actually, in the past 20 years, there's a lot of so-called labor scholars. I want to badmouth certain scholars, although I did not name them. Huh? Can I? They have been writing a lot about how it is possible to reform the ACFTU. They never succeed. It's just a joke. So yeah, that is. But it's also speak for one thing that it is not easy. But well, life will find its way. The people will find its way. As long as we as still and outsiders, we need to understand them fully, grasp the situation they are in before we reach any conclusion. And secondly, yes, I'd like to briefly respond to the question of Cuba or China. No, I do not know the Cuba and China's relationship, and I am happy to hear more about that. But in general, the Chinese Communist Party is very, very effective in utilizing this so-called old relationship, the relationship between party and party, right? Between, say, Chinese Communist Party and Chinese Cuban Communist Party, or the French Communist Party, or you can name again and again and again and again. And actually, just recently, there is an essay in the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, which is very pro-China. But of course, there is now the people's, even in the Rosa Luxemburg Foundations and all the supporters, people are not entirely the same opinion. There are some good people who begin to know about China and ask difficult questions, pose difficult questions for these Beijing apologists, and so on and so forth. But there is one thing that we do have to know, that China has a global reach today. And its Tongzhan, unfortunately, is United Front. It's so-called United Front strategy. It's very, very effective. Just a personal revelation is, say, for instance, just last year, I was invited as a speaker, panel speakers in the so-called BRICS from Below conference, a parallel conference for NGO and trade unions in these 5 countries. And but the host in India suddenly told me the night before that we have to remove you as speaker. Why? Because the Brazilian MST protest against my presence, and they threatened to pull out if I spoke. So they have to comply. And behind this, of course, there's lots of lobbying, persuasion, or even bribing. I'm not talking about the MST in this situation, okay? I'm saying in general. I do not know that particular situation, but I did encounter a lot of these kind of things. That in Philippines, speaking in a university, and then you can see there are local Chinese association peoples and come up and then argue the otherwise. Well, I don't mind arguing. But the problem is there is a pattern you can see that Chinese Communist Party has a global reach. It has a global agenda. It has is spies, of course, in Africa. But what is more quite unimaginable to many people in Europe and in other parts of the world, they have police stations stationing in different countries, in Europe, in America, in other parts of the world, to monitor and to repatriate back their targets, their fellow citizens. I'm speaking about this is what is, it is very, very powerful, and it does not mind to go into the smallest, finest detail in order to get it done. Therefore, and apart on top of this, they have also, a very strong lobbying, say, for instance, in the academia area, in the trade unions areas. That is why in China, in US, there will be still quite a portions of unionists are Beijing apologists. And when I talk to them, they are not bad people. They are neither are they, necessarily Communist Party, but they just believe their argument for whatever reason. They know how to convince certain kind of people. So this is, so you can imagine we are relatively free, okay? But actually, no. We are under constant surveillance, and there are people behind your back designing on lots of the detailed things in order to target opposition here in London, in New York, in other parts of the world. And what's so unimaginable that they target diplomats, government officials, especially Communist Party in the world. So Cuba is being, is very pro-China. That doesn't really surprise me at all. We better get ready for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Al. I propose that people try and come back for past, so that we can start the final session on time and enjoy Louis' presentation.